Gentlemen, and welcome to our latest episode of Valley Veterans Forum here at CMAC, the Community Media Access Collaborative. My special guest tonight is Janice Stevens, who is both instructor, mentor, and I guess you can call it whip at the Clovis Veterans Memorial monthly meetings every Monday. We meet every Monday at the Clovis Veterans Memorial District, and Janice is our instructor. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Janice and let us have a little bit of an intro as to how you got involved with the Clovis Veterans Memorial District.
Well, I would call the Stories of Service one of the joys of my life, one of my passions. And I was invited to do this way back in 2002. I'm a college instructor, English, and an opportunity came up to teach memoir writing for Clovis Adult School in addition to my college classes. And I jumped at the chance because I've done memoir and I love it. And so I had done that for a couple of sessions, and then Tom Wright from the Clovis Veterans Memorial District approached Clovis Adult School and said, you have an instructor who could teach the veterans to tell their stories. So that got me in the door, and I've been doing it ever since,
Now,
2002.
When did that actually begin?
In 2002, March of 2002.
And how large were the first meetings?
Well, we started with like eight students,
people.
8 people.
And now we typically have up to 50 or 60.
Over 60
Sometimes
many times.
over 60.
Yeah.
From all services, from the Second World War on forward to the most recent conflicts.
When I started, we had predominantly World War II veterans, and as you know now, we have predominantly probably Vietnam, Korea, and very few of our World War II veterans.
Yeah.
So it's been a poignant journey to get the stories, hear the stories. I'm not an instructor, they teach me every day. And it's more of the facilitator and making sure we stay away from politics in the group, so they share their stories.
Yeah, you sometimes have a difficult time doing that because
yes,
we all have an opinion and we want to voice it.
Exactly.
But it's been a real pleasure for me to attend these classes, and very cathartic, I might add. And the ability to meet and come in contact with so many people that I've become good friends with.
Absolutely.
Many of whom have actually appeared on previous Valley Veterans Forum.
Right.
One of the things that you have been involved in also has been the honor flight of recent years.
Right.
And I guess you were recently invited to go on one of the honor flights yourself. And
I did. I was invited to go. Actually, it was the second flight out, and now they just had their 12th. And as a writer for Central Valley Magazine and freelance sometimes for the Bee, I asked if I could go. I asked my editor if I could go and cover the honor flight story, and got their permission to do it, and got the little lanyard with a badge that made it official.
Yeah.
And then I checked with Al Perry, and he said, sure, we have room, we can do this. So what a tremendous privilege that was. I really, really enjoyed that. It was so moving. I wasn't a guardian, so the guardians are assigned to their veteran. They're glued at the hip. They never leave them. Perfect safety record because of that. But I was free to come and go and be with some of the veterans and then go with other veterans. And it was just a tremendous experience. Unforgettable.
Now, we were invited by Mr. Kemmerer, who is a regular attendee of our meetings, an ex-Marine, to attend the recent departure of the honor flight that occurred on Monday. And we'll bring up a little clip and show our audience what it was like for us to be there. And when we get back, we'll talk about the stories of service.
Okay.
And some of the stories in there.
Okay.
Valley Honor Flight has been one of the most amazing things that so many of us have ever been involved in. It speaks so highly of the Valley and the character of the people here. 16 million Americans served in World War II, but the memorial to their more than 400,000 fallen friends wasn't completed until 2004. Most veterans were too old to get there if they were even still alive, but it started with one man taking one veteran to this memorial. It spread like wildfire across the country. And when we started it here in the Valley in 2013, we weren't sure what was going to happen. But the people of the Valley have stepped up, supported it financially, and 800 veterans now have experienced this trip to their memorial that they wouldn't have had otherwise, absolutely free of charge. It's just our way of saying thank you for their service, and along the way we learn so much, we're inspired by their stories, it educates our younger generations, and it reminds us all that freedom isn't free, and that we have a lot to be proud of as Americans and residents of this Valley.
Well, I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do that. And I understand that this morning from watching the news that they've just come back from that trip. There was a lot of smiling faces.
Yes.
Now would be a good time to talk about some of the stories that are contained in your Stories of Service. Stories of Service Volume 1 is predominantly World War II.
It is
as
all.
I recall.
All World War II. Mm-hmm.
And then Stories of Service Volume 2 continues on World War II and then goes through Korea and Vietnam and Cold War.
Right,
Okay.
correct.
Let's talk about one of the first characters in the World War II section, a gentleman by the name of Bill Begley, also known as Wild Bill Begley. He was on the Bataan Death March in the Philippines and survived that and told his story through one of your vignettes. And Bill just passed away, I guess, in this past year at the Community Living Center at the VA.
Right.
But he was, according to the people that knew him, he was quite a character and well received at the VA, and remained in the military for quite a period of time throughout his life.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, Wild Bill, that was his name. I mean, his nickname, and I mean, he was a character, but he loved his fellow veterans. There was a camaraderie and a special bond that he had, and wanted to come back and serve them as well. And I think he did. Yeah. I think that's a statement of who he was. But the Bataan Death March, tough journey, and
the horrors of war can really be spelled out by when you hear personal stories like that.
Exactly.
And read about them. It's just incredible that more people aren't aware of the horrible aspects of war that some people have had to live through.
Right. With these little stories, they're vignettes of their lives, but I know you've read the book, and so you know that they're very matter of fact. They don't glorify those experiences. They don't make themselves more than they are. They don't think they did anything extraordinary. And yet, to us, they did. They're our heroes, but they're very poignant stories, and it's entirely the way they wanted them depicted. No embellishment. I didn't do anything. Maybe fix a period once in a while, but that's it.
That's good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Betty Clark?
Betty Clark was part of our group, just passed away in the last couple of years, I believe. She was a wave. And we didn't have very many of our World War II ladies in there, so we treated them like they were pretty much royalty. But she was a wave, and her friend Helen Caraway, both of them were part of the waves and both part of the other group for a long time. And just a sweet, sweet lady. But the interesting thing to meet in the service and then become very, very good friends and then come back and be in our group and share that camaraderie again in our group. Sweet lady.
That was Helen Condit, who was on a previous show, was also introduced to me through you.
Yes.
So you've kept in touch with the women in service.
I did.
You've done a great job in that regard.
Helen hasn't been part of our Monday morning class, and I wish she would, because she's a spicy little thing.
She sure is.
And she's written some stories. She's in my memoir writing class on another day, and she's written some of her experiences of being in the military. And I've shared them with the Monday morning class. And she came one time, and people could see who this little lady is that wrote about that experience.
Now let's talk a little bit about Rudy Giannone,
Rudy
who was a
G.
POW, and I had the pleasure of not only meeting him and knowing him when he was still coming to the meetings on Monday, and then doing his story here on Valley Veterans Forum. And he also just passed away in the past year at the Community Living Center. And again, a guy who, tremendous inspiration to me.
Absolutely.
Very up to the very end, he just had a spirit that was incredible.
Absolutely.
Even when he knew he was, you know, about to meet his maker, so to speak. In the Community Living Center, he encouraged people to come and visit him, and which I did a couple of times, and just an incredible person. But his story was a fabulous story. Having been a waist gunner on a B-17, being shot down over Germany, becoming a prisoner of war, talking about the Death March. It just, to me, was mind-blowing. And one of the things that you're doing as a service, I think, to the public in general, is enlightening them about what any person has to go through when they're put into service.
Well, Rudy was such a special man. And I mean, he often told his story, was willing to tell his story to anybody that wanted to listen and wanted to ask. But he wasn't always like that. When he came home, he had a hard time even connecting with his mom and dad. He was home a little bit before he even talked to him because of the emotional reunion that he knew it would be. But then for years, he never told his story at all. And then his granddaughter asked what he did in the war. And it opened it up, and then he started sharing that story. And I think he spoke to more than 84 groups by the time he passed away. He wrote his book. My privilege to work with him for the book and be part of that, to encourage him to write and to tell his story and get down the documents and everything. So I'm eager for Debbie, his daughter, to get that out so it's ready for the public. But he spoke to my college classes. I assigned this book for their college assignment to read the book and write journals on it, and they were so enthralled with him. He came in the whole uniform of his the Purple Heart uniform and jacket and hat, and they just couldn't get enough of him because it was so inspiring. He said, you know, yeah, you ate sawdust, and you know, you eat little bugs, and it's no big deal, and you live, you survive, and you know, it was just that kind of an attitude over and over that just absolutely an inspiration.
Well, one of the things I took away from his personal story is how he inspired other prisoners to survive through all of the torture and the death march and everything by keeping them going. This is what happens. I've read many stories where guys that were POWs found they just broke and couldn't take it anymore. And threw themselves against electrified wires or whatever to end it all. But he was, as a Christian, he was a person that believed in through his faith that he would find salvation, and he did receive it. Tremendous man.
There's another POW too. He wrote Odyssey of a Creaky by Charles McMullen. He too, but and you speak of faith, and in his book, he said, I was never a big churchgoer, but I knew how to pray, and I did every foot of the way. That spiritual help and the physical help from others in the group, when it really got tough, enabled me to make it. And I think that spiritual connect to carry on and be able to push forward.
Now, another couple of stories in your book have to do with Stan Lee and his brother Harold. He actually wrote the story about Harold as a tribute to Harold, who was killed on Omaha Beach, I believe, or in the Normandy invasion at any rate. And it was his older brother. It was a deep loss to him. He looked up to him. And then he himself ultimately served in Korea.
Stan was a young boy. I think he was around 10 or 11 when the man came to the door with a telegram saying that Harold had passed away. That was such an impact on Stan's life that I think his whole he devoted his life to a tribute to Harold. And all of the brothers share. There's
Right.
the brother Harold, and I've forgotten the other brothers' names, but the 3 or 4 of the brothers all served. But Harold was the one that Stan admired
to.
so much and wanted to preserve that history, and he created a lot of memorials to Harold as a result of that. But he served in his own right, too.
Yeah. Well, Stan is a regular attender of our meetings, and
Right.
he's a delight.
Yes, sweet man.
He's a delight. He doesn't have a trouble telling a story, and when he's in a good mood, he's a really delightful person to
Yes.
be around.
Absolutely.
Now let's get back to Charles.
Okay.
You read a little bit of an expert, but
Right.
we have him scheduled to come up.
Right.
A picture of him at any rate. And one of the things, I didn't know him personally, but he was, again, a prisoner of war who suffered quite a bit. And as you pointed out earlier in the conversation, his prayerfulness is what really helped him survive.
Exactly. And he wasn't a regular contributor to the class. He came a few times. He was a good friend with Gene Boss and came. And in fact, Gene said, I have a friend you've got to meet. And I met him, and this was outside of the class, and I convinced him to come. He had written his own book of that experience, and he gave me the whole book, said, use whatever you want. And the joy of going through that book and the challenge to excerpt out enough of the story to describe the character of this man who captured and put in boxcars, and that whole experience, and then the release, the liberation, and ending up at the Stalags, the whole thing that he did of trying to say, what can I keep? I can't do the whole book in this one little book of collection.
Yeah.
But, and again, one of these matter-of-fact depictions, it's just, this is what I did, it's no big deal, the details, a lot of details in that book.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a published book, it was more of a personal book that he did for his family. And one of my roles as a mentor of a lot of these writers, and the veterans especially, is to take it beyond the audience of the legacy for their family. That this is history that needs to be preserved and it needs to be shared. So taking it out to the published book available to the audience is what I like to do.
And you do a good job.
Thank you.
My next person on the list is Bob Owens, or Robert Owens. He is also a regular attendee of our class. Bob was a submariner.
Yep.
And one of the stories is about the first submarine that he served on. After that, he went to serve as an executive officer on, I can't remember the name of the second ship he was on, but he, in his times there at the Clovis Veterans meetings, when he gets the microphone, he has no trouble speaking his piece and opining on various aspects of the current Navy. I was particularly interested in his own career because my dad had been a submariner in the Second World War. And like many of these other veterans from the Second World War, they never really talked too much about their experiences. They kept them bottled up, and so I had to learn about it the hard way by basically exploring on my own.
Well, Bob's, he's in my memoir writing class too.
Is he?
Besides that, and I am thrilled to say he has 60 stories written already.
Wow.
And on just Wednesday, I said, what can I do to help you do this? And he said, oh, I don't know, I've just written them out. And I said, I want to help you put this into a book
and publish it, of course.
Yes, and so then typing is a little, he says, they have to be typed up. And I said, well, what about the Dragon program? And he said, well, I have that and I don't know how to use it. And I said, I'll do it for you. I have the Dragon program too. It would be easy to read through his 60 stories and have the Dragon pick it up. And I'm hoping he'll allow me to get my hands on that and get that book out, because 60 stories, we hear a little bit in the classes and you'll share, and something will come up and then it'll remind him of another story. And working with admirals, working on the SALT Treaty with Russia.
Right.
I mean, he has a tremendous history, military history. So I am thrilled to have him produce so much work here.
Yeah, I just myself read a book called Blind Man's Bluff, which was
Yes.
on the New York Times bestseller list, and it was all about the Cold War submarine service. And
Yes.
that he was able to add quite a
Yes,
few
he was.
insights to
Yes.
that on his own, and
Yes,
acknowledge
exactly.
the fact that the story that I particularly brought up during that meeting was a true story.
Right.
Pretty incredible,
Right.
you know.
I mean, you look at the span of being, I mean, I have very few veterans that are in Volume 1 that are included in Volume 2, unless they served in other wars.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to duplicate it because I had so many. There's like 110 veterans in each book. But Bob Owens is one of the exceptions, that his World War II story is in here, and then it goes clear to the Cold War.
Yeah.
And so you look at that career, military, and the experiences that he's had. It's just rich, rich history.
Well, perhaps as a way to encourage him to get his book published, I can have him come on here if
I
he's
hope he
willing to do it.
does.
Kind of hinted to him that I'd like to have him come on, but maybe
Yeah.
if we gang up on him together, we can get that
I
done.
would be happy to poke and prod. Come on.
Great. The next person I have on my list is Leon Rockwell, only
Yeah.
because he's a person I knew in my professional career as a real estate broker, and I didn't ever know this story about his service in the Pacific on a B-17 as a pilot until I read your book.
Yeah.
And I
that
thought,
something?
well, perhaps you know a little bit more about Bob.
About Leon,
About
yes,
Leon,
and he
excuse
was
me.
a dentist too for a while.
Right.
Worked with children and knew Leon for years. He was part of my memoir writing class, and Wednesday morning memoir writing class, and he shared a lot of his personal history, Las Vegas history. His dad was very involved. The Rockwell Airport in Las Vegas as part of his family, and had a lot of those histories. And every once in a while, he would write a memoir on his military history. And he ended up doing a whole binder, which I have, of the military histories of his work and the different things that he did, the missions that he flew and everything else. A very, very interesting man. Diabetic, and that's what got him in the end. But a really good man, good friend. Used to sit right next to me in my memoir writing class for years. But he wasn't very often, maybe once or twice, that he came to our Monday morning class.
Yeah.
Shared a little bit of the story, but he was a regular in my other class.
Well, a person who I don't have on this list, but probably should bring up, is Mr. Pickett, who happens to be on the board. But
Gordon Pickett, of course.
I read his story about his dead stick landing.
Yes.
Incredible for anybody that's a pilot.
Yes.
To be able to pull off a dead stick landing on an aircraft carrier
Yeah.
was an amazing feat.
And I think that's...
And he speaks of it so matter-of-factly.
Of course, like they all do. But I think, isn't that the story that he related to the J factor? And I said J factor and his Jesus factor, and it opened up that Monday morning class to a lot of stories about the J factor. Fascinating.
Yeah, and he happens to be pretty close to one of the original astronauts, whose name escapes me right now, but he played...
Buzz Aldrin.
Okay, yeah. He played a tape one time for us.
Yes.
That was dovetailed exactly with the religious experience that he had.
Exactly. Yeah, that was, I would love to get a copy of that tape. That was fascinating to hear the words of that man and the landing and his impression, spiritual connection.
Yes, exactly.
Was just a beautiful thing. But Gordon's he's been on the board of Clovis Veterans Memorial District for a long time.
Yeah.
Several years.
And he still has another year to go.
I think so.
That's
I
what he
think
mentioned the
so.
other day.
Yes. I don't think he's ready to throw his hat in on that one.
Now let's talk, this will be a fun thing. Let's talk a little bit of Wally Peterson.
Oh, Wally. Wally's a character.
Wally's a character. He runs the raffle every month, quite outspoken, and we have a lot of fun with him there.
We do.
Because he becomes the brunt of a lot of jokes
Yes.
over a certain thing that I won't bring up right now, but
Can't I share that?
the bottom... Well, it's up to you, but the bottom line is
He wouldn't mind.
he's had some health issues recently.
Yes, he has.
And he's come back, bounced back already. He was at the most recent meeting that I attended, and I guess he was there last week too.
Back to
he's
his raffle now.
Wally has a heart of gold,
He does.
and he loves talking about aspects of his military service, even the less stellar aspects of it.
Right. Right. Wally's in our second book, volume of Stories of Service, Korean War veteran. He was a former, retired school teacher, taught photography, and I don't remember the other that he taught, maybe history, but character. And some of the stories that he will digress from our military stories, he'll talk about his almost a different kind of military, being in the trenches in the school campuses and dealing with his students. But he's a character, and what maybe I shouldn't be sharing is the fact that we keep waiting for him to earn the Good Conduct Medal. And for your audience, just to be clear, that's a joke. But he's a character, and so we pick on him by saying, well, that's why you don't have the Good Conduct Medal, because you couldn't earn it. So everybody else in the class has that medal except for Wally. So he's still trying to earn it.
There's another member of our class who brings up the fact that he doesn't have a Good Conduct Medal either. I can't remember his name right now, but he almost brags about it because he did see.
He really didn't get one?
No, he did see ground service in Vietnam, and he was an actual warrior.
Yes, yes.
The last person I'd like to talk about, well, not the last person, but one person I'd like to talk about now is Earl Watson, who I got to know personally, along with my son, a fine gentleman who fought in the Battle of the Bulge.
Right.
And like many black servicemen, and from those days, was discriminated against because of his color of his skin, and basically had to fight to earn his way back to gain respect. And one of the things that he did his published book, Doorman to the Stars, which you gave me a copy of.
Yes, I have it too.
A fabulous story of a man who took a talent that he had for dealing with other people and brought it to the fore by his social actions.
And he's was a very sweet, and having passed away too, a very sweet-spirited man, that you didn't see that bitterness, you didn't see that abuse, which he would have. In World War II was notorious for the treatment of the blacks. And yet you didn't hear, he wrote the book and he told it the way it was, but it wasn't a poor me thing. It was just the facts. But I think he really enjoyed being the doorman to the stars.
Yeah.
That was fun for him, and to be able to talk about all these people that he would meet, and they knew him, they respected him, and I think he enjoyed that.
Yeah, he did. Let's talk a little bit about Tom Morton. He doesn't appear in your books, but you helped him.
Not yet.
Not yet, but
well,
you helped
if I do
him
another
as
one.
you've helped many other attendees of the class by mentoring them and helping them write their own.
Tom, if I don't know how much time I have here to tell about Tom, but I am extremely proud of Tom, not only for the book he wrote, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, but the fact that he wrote the book, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. He first came into my Writing for Pub class. He was a little bit into the veterans class, but he was writing different things. He wrote about golf, he wrote about his cats, wrote about these different things. And I knew he was a Vietnam veteran. So one Monday morning, we were talking about Vietnam, and I said, Tom, you're a Vietnam veteran. Do you have a story you could share? And I got this.
Yeah.
He said, some stories should not be told. And I said, I understand. And then one day, and it would have been maybe 3 or 4 months later, all of a sudden, it was kind of a quiet Wednesday afternoon class, the Writing for Pub class, not as many people in class, and he put his name down to read a story. It was the Tet Offensive. And it was oh my goodness, we were in tears because it was the story of such severity, brutality, and trauma, and he did it. And he did it. That was the breakthrough. And from that moment on, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot was born.
Yeah.
It's a great story, great man. He's a Purple Heart recipient, of course, and I'm so glad you've covered him here in the Veterans Forum.
We have quite a few Purple Heart recipients in the class. I know Bill Helton.
Yes, Bill Helton.
And Tom. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for joining us for our latest episode of Valley Veterans Forum here at CMAC, the Community Media Access Collaborative, and hope that you will join us again soon for upcoming programs.